Governor John Hickenlooper signed an executive order on Wednesday aimed at handling the growing orphan oil and gas well crisis in Colorado. The order is to have all 260 abandoned oil wells in the state shut down and cleaned up by the year 2023. The plan is expected to cost a total of $25 million, and that will come from a tax charged to oil and gas companies. David, the path to funding this was a little tricky. Trying to follow it in the different articles, I may not have it exactly right, but what do you think of how, is it fair the way this project is going to be paid for?
I would say yes, and this executive order by Governor Hickenlooper has an advantage over some of his other recent executive orders in that this one is actually lawful, because all he's basically doing is he's not, the governor doesn't have some unilateral magical, nor does the president, executive order power. You can only do executive orders to direct the executive branch how to implement existing law. This one is actually based on existing law. He's basically giving some specificity to the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission in implementing a bill that the legislature passed this session and that he signed, and it puts a tax on current oil and gas producers to use that revenue to go and shut down and look for and inspect abandoned wells, which of course the original producers didn't cause. It was somebody else's fault. But it's an intra-industry tax, and it's an example of how Colorado, I think, has a very strict but fair system of oil and gas regulation. And obviously abandoned wells are a hazard, so it's great that they will be found and capped.
Scott, there is a potential ballot issue that would increase the setbacks for any oil and gas well from 500 feet to 2,500 feet, which would make a dramatic difference. We're already seeing ads in the oil and gas industry on TV saying that this is a bad idea, and the issue is not even on the ballot yet. When you see something like this and Governor Hickenlooper making a move, how do you think it would affect this potential ballot issue?
Yeah, so I think that's exactly the lens to look at this through, right? So the Hickenlooper model is that that he believes that we can work together with industry, that industry can police themselves, and that through the agreements that he can forge with industry, we can actually get in front of these problems. And we've seen that on his methane rules, and we saw this with the executive order. And on the other side, and it's curious that as you look at this election, I mean, that will not necessarily be the Polis approach to these issues, who's been antagonistic on these issues. So, I mean, I kind of see this as perhaps, we don't know what will happen over the next few months, the governor's sort of last statement on how you deal with these issues against the backdrop of a ballot measure and against the backdrop of a governor who is, a Democratic candidate for governor who's known for a very antagonistic approach to the industry. I think some of the things that need to be looked at as well are, what's going to happen to the lines, not just the wells, right? And so what will happen to the lines, and then what happens around liability. So there are these other issues that may or may not be handled by the governor's collaborative approach to these issues, and time will tell.
Brother Jeff, did Governor Hickenlooper arrive at the right solution?
Well, I think it was a good plan to say we're getting in front of potential problems. I think that's a very good move. When we talk about taxing, I always think about when you tax an industry or you tax a business, it still makes its way to the consumer. So the general population will be paying for this in some way, shape, or form. I was interested in what Director Tracy Bentley in the Denver Post, she's the head of the Colorado Petroleum Council, and she said that the industry in some ways would cap those wells for free, except for the fact that if you touch them, you become absolutely liable for what comes after. But she says that with this potential of bringing forward different regulations and some ways to look at that, that might be a way to bring the industry back into getting involved with this issue as well.
Patty, did this need an executive order from the governor? Is this the right way to do it?
Well, it might have been solved a different way, but certainly this capped it. One part of a very contentious issue, good solution for historic issues. The question will be, with the backdrop of the ballot measure we've got coming up, which is going to be extremely contentious, with the gubernatorial race coming up, which is going to be extremely contentious, because whereas Polis is definitely tougher on oil and gas companies, I think we can safely say Walker Stapleton isn't. So at least we have the ancient wells issue settled for now.